The video began like so many others that pass through the endless scroll of social media, a shaky handheld recording, muffled voices in the background, the faint suggestion that what you were about to watch was not staged but captured in the raw, ugly truth of life. It opened with a crowded restaurant, a hum of laughter and clinking glasses, waiters drifting between tables with trays balanced carefully in their hands. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then the camera zoomed in on one table tucked into the corner. A man sat there, his hand intertwined with that of a woman who was not his wife. The tension in the clip built almost imperceptibly. A murmur rose in the background, then a gasp as a second woman entered the frame, his actual partner, who approached slowly, deliberately, like a storm rolling over a horizon. In the recording, you could hear the collective intake of breath from diners who realized they were about to witness something they would tell others about for weeks. She walked straight up to the table, her face calm but her body taut with restrained fury. The man scrambled, stammering, trying to let go of the other woman's hand, but it was too late. His partner pulled a phone from her bag, held it high so that every eye in the room could see, and pressed play. What came next was not shouting, not accusations, but a compilation of secret recordings, text messages, voicemails, clandestine meetups, all edited into a damning highlight reel of betrayal. The restaurant had become a courtroom, and the jury was unanimous. The fallout was immediate. Diners whispered, phones appeared, flashes of light captured the man's wide-eyed shame. By the time the clip cut to black, the man's reputation was already in shreds, carried away on the unstoppable tide of the internet. Within hours, the video spread across platforms, labeled with captions like "Cheating Partner's Epic Downfall" and "Justice Served Cold." It was everywhere, stitched into reaction videos, dissected in comments, memes multiplying faster than the truth could keep up. But behind the viral sensation, there was a story that no caption, no 15-second edit could capture. And that is where I found myself, curious, drawn to the quiet spaces between the frames, wondering who had recorded it, who had planned it, and whether revenge this calculated was ever truly spontaneous. The woman at the center of the storm was named Claire. On camera, she had seemed calm, collected, almost rehearsed, as though she had known this day would come. When I reached out to her, I discovered that was exactly the case. Claire had been living with suspicion for months. Her partner, Daniel, had grown distant, disappearing with excuses that wore thin over time. She had caught glimpses, unexplained receipts, late-night messages that he guarded too closely. Instead of confronting him, she began gathering screenshots, voice notes, the quiet testimonies of mutual friends who had seen him in places he had no business being. But Claire hadn't wanted just proof. Proof could be dismissed, twisted into denial. She wanted spectacle, an unmasking so complete that Daniel would never recover from the humiliation. And so she planned. The restaurant was not chosen at random. It was his favorite, a place where he felt untouchable, where he had celebrated promotions and birthdays. She timed her entrance, edited the evidence into a sequence that played out like a prosecutor's argument, and ensured a friend was ready with a phone to capture every second. By the time she pressed play in front of the crowded dining room, Daniel was already ensnared in the trap she had built with meticulous patience. The internet did the rest. His employer, who prided itself on family values, saw the clip before the weekend was out. He was placed on indefinite leave, pending a review of conduct. His family disowned him, his friends scattered. Daniel disappeared into the quiet corners of anonymity, stripped of everything but the echo of his humiliation. What fascinated me, though, was not Daniel's ruin, but the reach of Claire's revenge. The video had become a symbol, a rallying cry for those who had been betrayed. In forums and comment threads, people shared their own stories, some raw, some decades old, of partners who had lied, cheated, walked away without consequence. The clip became not just about Daniel and Claire, but about every slight, every broken trust that people had carried in silence. It was as though Claire had handed them all a piece of justice, even if it was borrowed. Among those who watched was Amelia, a woman from a small town hundreds of miles away. She had been wronged too, years earlier, by a partner whose betrayal had nearly broken her. For years she had swallowed the bitterness, telling herself to move on, to be the bigger person. But watching Claire's calm, orchestrated revelation lit something inside her. She reached out to Claire, first with a message of admiration, then with a confession of her own. Soon, the two were talking late into the night, their conversations a blend of shared pain and shared strategy. And then Amelia made a choice. She decided that her own betrayal would not end in silence. She began her own quiet collection, tracing her ex's habits, his boasts, his hypocrisies. Where Claire had staged a public confrontation, Amelia's revenge took a different shape, a carefully timed leak of information that dismantled the life of the man who had wronged her. His business deals unraveled, his secrets spilled across digital spaces where they could never be scrubbed away. It was surgical, precise, devastating. The viral clip that had begun as one woman's act of personal revenge had rippled outward, sparking a chain of reckonings far beyond the walls of that single restaurant. Claire had not just exposed one man. She had created a blueprint for retribution, one that others would adapt, refine, and unleash in their own ways. As I pieced the story together, I couldn't help but wonder what it meant. Was this justice, or simply cruelty given a stage? Was the internet a court where the guilty were finally held accountable, or a mob where shame was weaponized until it destroyed everything in its path? The video still plays on my screen sometimes, the familiar sequence looping endlessly. The betrayal, the confrontation, the downfall. But what lingers with me is not the moment Daniel's world collapsed. It is the quiet, steady look on Claire's face, the certainty in her eyes. It was not rage that had driven her. It was something colder, sharper, more enduring. And that certainty, more than the viral spectacle, is what makes her story impossible to forget. In the weeks that followed the viral explosion, the clip evolved into something larger than anyone, even Claire, could have anticipated. The internet has a way of stripping ownership from a moment, transforming it into a shared cultural artifact. Claire had not just caught her partner red-handed, she had inadvertently created a digital myth. Memes and remixes sprouted like weeds. Reaction channels dissected her poise. Commentators debated whether she had gone too far, whether revenge was justified, whether humiliation was a fair punishment for betrayal. But while strangers argued, Claire lived in the quiet aftermath. Her phone never stopped buzzing, messages of solidarity, strangers telling her their own heartbreaks, even offers from production companies who wanted to dramatize her story. She ignored most of it. For her, the revenge had never been about attention. It had been about closure. The attention was simply collateral, though she couldn't deny the strange thrill of watching Daniel's name become shorthand for disgrace. I found myself drawn to Amelia more and more, the woman who had reached out to Claire after seeing the video. If Claire's revenge had been a public execution, Amelia's was a shadow war. She worked slowly, with a patience that bordered on obsession. Her former partner, Richard, was a man who thrived on appearances, his business, his friendships, even his marriage after Amelia, all carefully curated images of respectability. But Amelia knew the cracks beneath the surface, and she began prying them open one by one. Anonymous emails landed in inboxes. Documents slipped into the right hands. Conversations Richard had long forgotten resurfaced in recordings. Amelia never showed her face, never raised her voice in a restaurant, never let herself be captured in a single frame. Unlike Claire, she didn't want to be known. She wanted to be felt, a ghost, a reckoning, the whisper of consequences he couldn't escape. When Richard's company folded under the weight of investigations, when his new wife walked out after discovering his double life, when his name appeared in local papers under headlines he couldn't scrub away, Amelia was nowhere to be seen. But she was there, behind the curtain, watching his downfall with the same steady certainty that Claire had shown. What unsettled me most as I pieced these stories together was the contagion of revenge. It spread like a virus, not just from Claire to Amelia, but outward to countless others who found in that clip a permission they had never given themselves. Forums filled with discussions of strategic justice. Private groups were created where people compared notes, shared tactics, offered advice on how to collect evidence, how to expose, how to humiliate without consequence. It was as though a new genre of digital retribution had been born, and I began to wonder, what happens when revenge stops being personal and becomes communal? What happens when betrayal is not just punished privately but fed into the machine of the internet, where shame never dies and consequences are amplified beyond measure? I tried to reach Daniel again, to hear his side, but he had vanished almost completely. Friends told me he moved out of the city, deleted every account, changed his number. Some said he was trying to rebuild. Others claimed he spiraled into bitterness and isolation. Whatever the truth, he had become the cautionary figure at the heart of a story he never intended to star in. Claire, when I spoke with her again months later, seemed lighter. Not happy exactly, but unburdened. She admitted the revenge had not healed her completely. It never could, but it had ended the question that had haunted her, whether he would ever face consequences for what he had done. He had, and more than either of them could have predicted. Amelia, by contrast, was harder to read. There was no smile in her voice, no triumph. Only a quiet satisfaction, like someone who had carried a weight for too long and finally set it down. "It's not about winning," she told me once. "It's about balance. About making sure the scales don't stay tipped in their favor forever." Their stories stayed with me long after my investigation ended. Revenge, I realized, is rarely the clean victory we imagine. It doesn't mend what was broken, doesn't erase betrayal or restore lost trust. But in the age of cameras and networks and endless eyes, revenge has found a new stage, a stage where private betrayals can become public reckonings, where one viral moment can ripple outward and inspire a movement. The video that started it all is still online, re-uploaded, reposted, looped endlessly in feeds. People still laugh, still cheer, still dissect it. But for those who lived it, for Claire, for Daniel, for Amelia, it was never just entertainment. It was the moment betrayal collided with justice, the moment private pain became a spectacle. And in that transformation, something both powerful and unsettling was born, the knowledge that in this world, no secret stays hidden forever, and sometimes revenge is only a click away.